I'm excited to announce a new solution from H2K Labs, Revved Up. Revved Up is an invitation-only gathering and a brain trust for CEOs and their revenue-critical C-suite teams leading multi-sided businesses such as media, events, data and insights, marketplaces, and professional networks. So if you're a CEO or a C-suite leader interested in improving how your business is extracting maximum financial return from your most valuable asset data, then Revved Up is for you. Revved Up for CEOs and C-suite leaders takes place February 25th through the 27th in Sarasota, Florida. Please visit h2klabs.com/revvedup to learn more, and that's 2 V's. Welcome to the Revenue Room podcast, your go-to resource for uncovering how data powers revenue growth, profitability, and value creation across the information and marketing services industries, including media and events. Today, we're thrilled to have with us Narisa Wild, a powerhouse in digital transformation with over 26 years of experience shaping the future of global companies. Currently serving as the new Chief Digital Officer at Clarion Events North America, Narisa leads digital transformation initiatives that are revolutionizing customer-facing platforms across the region. Her expertise spans from developing world-class digital experiences to creating innovative SaaS solutions that drive substantial business growth. Before joining Clarion, Narisa held key leadership positions at Informa Markets, Penton and Scripps Networks, where she successfully led teams of up to 50 people and managed multi-million-dollar P&Ls. One of her most notable achievements includes co-founding and growing City Eats into the second-largest dining reservations platform in the U.S. With a BA double honors in French, with management studies from King's College London and executive education from Kellogg in design thinking and leadership, Narisa brings a unique blend of strategic vision and practical expertise to every project she touches. Known for being both an advocate and a disruptor, Narisa is currently championing AI initiatives and digital adoption strategies that are reshaping how businesses connect with their customers in the events and media space. Please join me in welcoming Narisa to the Revenue Room. Welcome, Narisa.
Hi, Heather. Thank you for having me. Really great to be here.
Yeah, I think it's one of our second times doing a digital interview. I think the first one was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that, you were at Informa Markets and the Natural Products Group, I think, or was it?
So I was in a central role under Group Technology.
Right. Right. Well, listen, let's get into, you have a really incredible background. And in fact, when I was doing a little research on, diving into your earlier career, it looks like you've really always been central to the digital aspect, and then obviously data coming into that. And you've led these initiatives across several of these companies, i.e. Clarion and Informa Markets. And one of the things I notice when I work with clients in media and events is there's this idea that, yes, let's do digital and data transformation, but the journey, the where to start and how to go through that journey isn't as well understood. And what's the most common misconception that you've seen in your experience?
I would put it into a couple of pillars. So when I think about, even this morning, I was thinking about digital transformation and what that actually means. And I almost feel like we should be rethinking this as a customer transformation, right? Because it's not about us, it's about the customer. And so I think that's the first misconception, is trying to jerry-rig a solution and a transformation strategy that fits the business needs without really thinking about what we're trying to accomplish for our customers. And so they can't be done in isolation of one another or without really focusing on both sides. So that customer transformation for me is pivotal in how I think about it. And I think the other tier, so it's internal, so culture, people, operationally, are you set up to succeed in that transformation journey that you're about to embark on? Do you have the right people? Has the shape of your organization shifted to support different skill sets, different roles? Are you really thinking about the right types of roles that you will need to support that transformation? So internal, you've got to go inside out, right? It's an introspection first to really ensure that you have the right people in place. And then once you feel that you're at least on the path to that journey around your people and your culture, then you start to think about what's the aspiration of the business. in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and where are we trying to get to, right? And obviously there's no end point, and when you get to the favorite book, we'll come full circle on that point. But you really want to know that you have to be agile, right? In your transformation is the other piece. It's not a single track road that leads to a destination, and you can't meander or pivot or deviate from that path. And there needs to be a willingness for your internal stakeholders and your customers to go on that journey. And it's a lot.
Well, I think you bring up something interesting with these pillars and the whole point about customer centricity and the customer is the center of the universe. One of the things that is important to think about with customer. Yes, you have your customers, right? Your audience, your buy side, your sell side, advertisers, sponsors, exhibitors, and your audience, your readers, your attendees. But you also have other customers if you think about it too. And you could think, I've worked with companies where they actually look at their employees as customers, their stakeholders, their critical stakeholders, and maybe they use a slightly different name, but you could actually use data not just to improve again, if your customer, your paying customer, or the customer that you're delivering value to is the center of the universe, and you actually think of the employees serving those customers as part of that ecosystem and make their ability to use data to serve those customers better part of that mindset, it becomes way more holistic. I don't know if you agree with that point
Yeah.
about the internal stakeholder part.
Yeah. And I think, an exercise, and I'll come back to your point, and to get there, with my own team, we do this exercise where we take concentric circles, and part of the piece around the value-based leadership, I know we're going to get to that too, is really understanding your internal and external network. And again, for me, it all starts with yourself, right? You have to really look at yourself and understand, what does my network look like? And obviously, at the closest, smallest concentric circle is typically your family members, the people closest to you, and then you move outwards and you start to look into your work network and your broader organization. And you'll find what's interesting for most of us is people that you need to be better connected and closer to. Probably many of them sit on those outer edges of those concentric circles. And I share that because even in what you were just explaining there with your, internal customers, right? And then customers, those are all those concentric circles. And honestly, you're right, Heather. If I think about where I sit and where, if I've got a sponsor of a webinar, right, and they're trying to garner leads around a product launch, and then those leads are the ones they're trying to attract, and then it might filter further into the organization of those leads because they might not be the exact point of contact. Our connection to the customers probably is farther out on that concentric circle. So hopefully that analogy and that picture helps solidify what you're saying, and I'm in agreement, but we need to get closer. And the only way I can do that is through data, right? And collecting that data intelligently and creating experiences where I'm able to access that and, intuitively collect the information that I want.
Absolutely. Again, you bring up another great point, which we used to call it gap selling in the old days, which is it's not just the direct customer, but it's the customer's customer, and even in some cases, as you say, the customer's customer's customer. And that's a very almost unique. It's very unique to media and any type of marketing service, right? Because the end game here that people are paying you for is they're paying you so that you're helping them fill pipeline, make sales, right?
Yeah.
So in order to do that, you not only have to understand the customer you're selling to, but the customer that they're selling to. And data is the way to do that. So
Yeah.
really great points.
And even internally for Clarion, right, what's interesting, we're, in North America, we're very focused on growing the top of our funnel, right? So we're thinking, I would say I spend 50-60% of my time thinking about the Gen Zs and the Gen As and how they become the future attendees or sponsors or consumers of our products and services, right? And what's interesting there is when we're filling that top of funnel through a various wide range of solutions that we're experimenting with, that we're using, that we're very familiar with, new and different ways, we always have prospects coming in who start off as attendees, become sponsors, could become exhibitors, peers of one another, entrepreneurs, and they shift. And over time, whether it's in the same company or at different companies, their role shifts as well. And that's a very interesting dynamic that I think event organizers, I don't know that we all think about how much we're in that shifting space, but we're in it a lot, and it happens all the time.
Well, the part that is interesting as well with the uh, people don't understand in a two-sided marketplace
Mm-hmm.
business model, and I'll take it to the Gen Z part, which I think is super critical to be thinking about that now. I mean, like you should have been thinking about it yesterday, but definitely thinking about
Mm-hmm.
it now, is the data that's happening on both sides of the fence, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's different GTMs. Yes, they're different user experiences and customer experience, but at the end of the day, if they do not converge, right, and are
Mm-hmm.
curated in ways to create that intel, there's that's really where a fail happens quite a bit, and it's where companies that aren't figuring out, and it's not just conversions of just delivering a lead, it's delivering more of the insights around it, as well as the next steps or the buyer intelligence, and preference and purchasing behavior.
Mm-hmm.
um, then your value is very limited, and it's going to get even further commoditized. But with the Gen Z part, which is where I call this like the tsunami of change that's happening right now, you not only have way more, your customers that you're selling advertising and sponsorship and all of that to are becoming much more demanding in terms of what they're expecting from you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some of your competitors are offering it, or even what I call adjacent market, that
Yeah.
you may not be competing directly. So they're getting used to a way richer, amount of data being given to them to help them understand the ROI of the programs and improve the ROI. On the flips, so you have that. So customer preferences, demands changing. You have the issue of AI really coming in and disrupting the way people, regardless of what age you
Mm-hmm.
are consuming and using information, both from a customer standpoint and an employee standpoint. So you have
Yep.
that issue. And then you actually have this whole new generation coming into the workforce that are now either already in it, or become or will become decision makers, right? These are going to become the new this side of the fence. And they are different across the board, like everything, and they're different just because they're the first ones, they're the digital natives. And so how you change your experience to engage that audience is going to be critical, and it's going to create a lot of shift. So all of this is happening at the same time. So major disruption, uh, I
It's a
like to
lot.
say.
And in that piece at the beginning we talked about around people and culture, it's very important that you have that dynamic mix of employees, of customers, so that you're constantly getting feedback, right? Just because someone's been doing this for 26 years doesn't mean that they know everything. And, that reverse mentoring, allowing, people who have been on the job for less than you to really give input and be a part of the experience that you want to create going forward for your customers. I mean, that's a humbling part of your role as if you're more seasoned and experienced, right? You have to be humble. The humility is also very important in value-based leadership, but it's also a very important part to the longevity and the future success of your business as well.
Oh, 100%. Who also talks about the humble factor quite a bit is Denise Medved,
Mm.
the chief
Oh, okay.
commercial officer. Yeah, she's
No.
really, trying to transform a whole revenue organization, and you have all different age groups and
Mm-hmm.
generations. And she's like, one of the biggest things is being humble, because I can't force something. I have
Right.
to learn from them.
Right.
So, all right, at Clarion Events, you're championing AI working groups and pilots. Can you share a specific example of one, how you're doing that? Because I think this is really important for the listeners to understand. There's so much confusion and complexity to this issue. Like, where do we start? And I think the working group construct is really smart. Um, and then with that, how are you through these groups seeing how AI can transform your events and media business? You know, how you're able to improve customer journey or customer outcomes.
Yeah. So taking it inside then out. So from an internal perspective, again, it goes back to we've got lots of voices and perspectives and different ways of thinking. And I think we're trying very hard to authentically, right, embrace that. So through the working group, honestly, I put together a form using AI where we asked a number of questions, and to be a part of the work group, you had to at least complete the form, right? And so anybody could participate and submit the form. And there were some really great answers in there, different questions that we asked. And so we got a great cross-section of people across the organization within Concero and Quartz, the sister businesses as part of the Clarion group, as well as Clarion North America to participate. And we're also hearing from finance, HR, legal, as well as commercial and marketing and product, and the more traditional roles that you would expect to be part of that working group. So the variety of voices is really important in a working group as well. And then the last thing I'd say are the tenets of a working group is you have to work, right? You can't just join, twice a month and listen and then go back to your job. You have to contribute, bring things to the table, bring ideas, be a strong contributor, right? So there are expectations, and Liz, our CEO, talks about this. The accountability of being part of these groups is very, very important to us. So we formed the group in that way. It came out of a competition that Blackstone actually held in July across all of the companies that they invest and own. And it allowed us to see such great ideas coming from across the organization around AI solutions. Everyone has a slightly different perspective in how they think about it, typically from the job that they're doing or the problem they're trying to solve. But we got great ideas, and we wanted to, within Clarion North America, say, well, how do we move this forward? So we took some of the ideas that we all collectively really liked across the working group. And then they started off as simple things as, we had X number of licenses for Microsoft Copilot, right? They're pretty expensive. So we want to really thoroughly test it across Clarion to see if it's the right solution for us or if there are other ways to do it. So, personally, I have the souped up license of ChatGPT and I use it a lot, right? And so I'm still remembering I got to go to, the assistant in Copilot and use that. And sometimes I'll compare and contrast. And I'm monitoring, not to be big brotherish, but I am monitoring who's really engaging with the product. I'm not looking at what they're doing, but how much they're using it, which tools they're using, like within Word and Microsoft and this and that. And, we actively have, a Teams channel for this group so people can put ideas. And we've learned so much just from each other. So that's been a definite peer-to-peer experience. And people are starting to see the benefits for their own balance, right, in their working day. That's really the goal that we've been trying to accomplish there, is how do we help you create balance through the efficiency that these tools bring. Then on the customer side, we've got a number of initiatives that we've started. One is that top of funnel that I was talking about. So we're partnering with a couple of early stage companies, I would say, who are doing really interesting work to automate a lot of the creative, right? So whether that's video or advertising or whatever the product is that they're creating, and it personalizes it to whoever the sender is. So if it's a sponsor outreach, it could come from, Joe Schmo. If it's a customer outreach, it could come from the executive vice president of that portfolio. And you see their face, you hear their voice, they're talking to you, Heather, right? They're not just talking about, right? So it feels very personal. And we're seeing massive engagement coming through from those personalized messages. And so as we're all talking about, making it specific to me is really, really important. So that's one example of how we're growing our funnel using AI. And then within the event experience as well, if somebody said to me, what's the one word that you take away from 2024 that you need to address for your transformation journey? It's time. Like, people are just time hungry. I feel like we've been saying that since 2000, but they're still time hungry. They don't have enough time for their family, for work, for travel, for consuming content, for learning, for doing their jobs, right? It's just so much. And it just snowballs, right? And so they come on to these events for 3 days. They've got expectations from their bosses because they've just spent, potentially a few $1,000s to be there. And they've got goals, right? They've got very specific goals. And so we've introduced a second screen experience at some of our events, and we're testing this. We're getting feedback. We're refining the quality of what the content is. And so where we have sessions, sometimes north of 150, it's just impossible, right, to prioritize as much as we personalize the schedule and we do a number of things to help them hone in on what's important to them. They still don't have the time to attend all of those sessions. And then if there are sponsors involved, it's hard to get those leads and the quality and the ROI that the sponsors are seeking as well. So we've introduced the second screen experience, which in real time is listening and contextually providing the cliff notes, right? The executive summary, the insights. It's listening to how those keywords are being spoken about in the social environment, what others are saying about it at the event, how people are reacting to it, what feedback it's giving. And it's collating all of that and providing these really sharp, insightful summaries that they have heart and context, right? And that's a really important piece. It feels like somebody that knows you and knows the industry actually wrote that versus, a machine kind of spitting out a summary. And that's the difference. And we've been really working with the partner to tweak and invest in creating that contextual and emotional connection. And so for the customer experience at the event, it's the balance of using AI, but then how do we win over their hearts, right? We're winning hearts and minds at in-person events. That's a primary factor. I only feel like Liz actually said something similar when you met with her. We want to win over people and the experience that we create. So that's been very important to us. And then the last thing I'll say is with AI, we're exploring right now, and I'm really excited about this piece, two things. Like, one is using the language models to really ingest agendas from previous years, ingest content, and then look out into the wider system for that industry, the ecosystem of that industry, to understand trends that are forming, topics. Social listening is really important there, contextual information around the industry to help at least the editorial team start to create agendas on things that they could be missing, right? And so these are tools that we're looking to build ourselves, but then also using AI capabilities as widgets, right? So we talked about this right at the beginning of the call, where I need to address the Gen Z person in the room. And so the way I might do that, and remains to be seen, is having a widget that actually says, if you attended InsurTech Connect, tell us a bit about yourself, like 3 or 4 pieces of information. And here's what your agenda could look like. And we might be using last year's information, but actually we can pull up in the agenda a pretty personalized view of that person's experience that drives them to then register for the upcoming event. So using context, personalization, and previous year information, which is also a great way to create some longevity around all of those assets we create to drive that top of funnel prospecting and conversion into registration of our events.
That's
Those are
amazing.
2
Wow.
ideas.
Quick question for you. Do you mind telling us the first one you talked about on the funnel creation one, the personalized messaging? Which platform is that?
So we're working with a young stage company called 60 Seconds.
Okay.
They're UK based.
I want to look them up. And then for the what you're doing on
Screen.
for the attendee experience on the show floor right now, you have
Yeah.
a partner, and who is that?
So we're working with a company called Rosie AI, and we're investing a lot of time with our events teams, to refine the templates, as I said, to make sure there's context, make sure they understand who the voices are, make sure that there's heart and soul into those executive summaries and those insights and the debriefs. So they provide, a summary of each session, a debrief at the end of each day. So imagine that, right? You've gotten your 27,000 steps, you've met with, 12 people on the show floor, you've had your one-to-one meetings, you've attended maybe 3 sessions, you stood in line at Starbucks for 40 minutes for a coffee, you're absolutely whipped, right? Now you've got to go to the opening reception and you get an hour back at your room, you get delivered your debrief for the day, and then suddenly you can be intelligently informed about everything that was talked about, what's trending, what's hot, what's not, who's saying what. And so you go to the reception feeling like, you've been completely debriefed and ready to contribute to the conversation.
I love this one. I have a question on this one too, because because one of the things I always say about the event experience, and this happens to me, like, and I do events, you do events, and you go and you have all of this like great brain trust that's just been created, and then you just get back to real life, and then it's just it just drops. Not that you want it to drop, but you said we're time starved.
Yeah.
Is from the after event part, like, can this solution, or is the vision on the roadmap for the solution that it's like, okay, so not only this is everything I learned and this is my digest of everything that was happening, but those like 15 people I met with, whether they were handshakes with a peer or it was a vendor to, a buyer seller, like, these are the people I need to follow up with. And I'm going to get them into my CRM or whatever it may be so that I can action them. And that's like, I'm able to then see even more ROI from the participation.
Yeah, and what it will do is, so there's always that value benefit as well that you're trying to ensure that you fulfill and check, right? So everything that we do, like, why register, why attend, why connect, why, what's the value in it for me, right? And that's the question we, as the event organizer, need to be asking ourselves every time we ask for additional information, additional data points, is what's the value? So if we can provide those immediate access to leads, the context around why they provided those leads, so whether that's the session summaries, whatever the asset is or the output, it makes it much richer, right, for both the buyer and the seller, right, in that two-way conversation, because there's context there, right, whether that's from what we've done with the second screen experience, what we've done with the connections that we create through, the mobile app experience and the tools that we're using there, and the relevancy of it, right? And you've got to make sure it's easy. I think that's the other piece too, is like, how easy are we making it? To your point, I would love to get to a place where the leads go straight into the customer's Salesforce, right? I mean, that's like the holy grail of where you might want to get to. So then the only other piece I would add is, like, we want to make sure that when we're creating these experiences, right, so the second screen, we can productize it, right? There's always a monetization story, right, when we're for profit. So we want to create new opportunities to productize the second screen. So there's some really cool ways to add value from a sponsor standpoint, whether it's magnifying and increasing a sponsorship opportunity, or bringing new sponsors into the fold, right, who might not necessarily have felt that we had an appropriate place for them, especially around tech, innovation, entrepreneurs, early stage companies. That is a great opportunity for that part of our customer base. So yeah.
No, this is great. I actually I want to keep talking about this, but we have to move on to the next question. So this is an interesting question I have, and it's not so much about City Eats as a product, but it's more about launching a product that competes with an incumbent, which really you actually can think about with events and media happens all the
All
time.
the time.
So what key lessons did you learn about disrupting an established monopoly?
Yeah. That was an interesting experience. So I would say internally, so at the time, Scripps is now owned by Discovery, but Scripps felt there was an opportunity because, they were touching 100% of households in the US through content, right? Through Food Network, through all of the TV assets that they have, as well as the digital ones, but primarily the TV assets. And they knew, right? So I did a lot of work on the licensing side. They knew that when you replayed, Guy Fieri having shrimp and grits at some diner, the line at that diner would be around 6 blocks for the next 4 weeks, right? And then it would kind of wind down until such that it was presented again. And those reruns become really important in part of that strategy. So that created an opportunity to say household recognition, people believe and they trust, and the opportunity to close the loop with the restaurant community to say, we have you on the marketing side from bringing customers into your restaurant. Now we want to support you on your business side, right? So we're kind of closing the loop with our relationship with you, like end to end, and locking them in effectively, right? And you can think of that on the event side as well, where when you attend an event as an exhibitor, as an analogy, right, we're bringing the customers to you, hopefully in the right meetings and the right connections, and we create enough value that if we offer the tools and services, let's say like point of sales capabilities to drive sales on the show floor, whether it's, a really sophisticated sponsor portal for your leads, whether it's a way to automate the creation of your profile as an exhibitor year after year, whether it's a way to personalize and create those true connections, then you're closing that loop for that exhibitor to return year after year, right? Which is obviously a goal that we have. So that was kind of the premise, and one analogy there between that side of media and the media side that we're on now. And I would say that at the time, the tech was really important. So OpenTable in 2011 was not on an iPad, so that was the focus for that business. At the time, we focused on only providing an iPad. And then the really important piece is we became very niche and specific. So we went to, what I think is foodie town number one in the United States, Washington, D.C. It's not New York, which is really competitive. It's expensive. It's torturous to try to launch things in downtown Manhattan. But in DC, there's a lot more openness to new tech. So we understood the market, right? We really understood the market and the community, and we became part of the community. So we did a lot of work around media to support that community, both online, through, at the time, video content in apps was still fairly newish, still 14 years ago. And then the TV piece actually became secondary. It was all about the digital community that we were able to create, promoting these restaurants, letting the chefs have a voice. They had a strong voice. So here, for the events piece, trying to bring it back so I'm answering your question, brand storytelling is really critical. So, I would love for us to do more on that brand storytelling side. So particularly for companies with missions and purpose and objectives, like tell us your story, like reach people through hearts and minds, right? Reach them through the stories that you want to engage with and tell and express. And I think there's a great place for that, right? And an opportunity for us to continue to grow in that area. So that was really important. And then I would say the last thing on that, so be niche, be specific, target the audiences. So target the restaurateurs who are adopting that technology. So the understanding the audience profile was really, really important, and building for the future, right? We weren't building for what was already in place, kiosks in restaurant, ugly looking things that sit in the middle of the restaurant. We were trying to build for the future.
So I'm just literally scribbling notes down here. And okay, so lessons here. And this really does resonate, at least for me, on a few fronts. One is closing the loop, and like on the events and media side, which everyone wants to try to figure out. But okay, one is you have to truly understand your market and become a part of the market, right? It's really critical to immerse yourself and be part of the community. Find not just the niche, but the right niche, the right location.
Mhm.
Like, for example, DC versus New York, right? It would have been so much harder to do this in New York. And
Yeah.
therefore, even if the idea would have been a fabulous one, the rate of failure was so much higher. Go to a
Right.
place where it could succeed
And
and
I did
allow.
live in New York, just so you know, so it would have been easier for me.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, just even that point there, so many times we make that mistake. Like, because we're like, oh, it seems obvious, but then you're not really thinking
It's not
bigger
about us.
picture.
So,
Right, it's not about us, it's about the
yeah,
customer.
yeah.
And then with your about the chefs, the
Mhm.
allowing the influencer, the product owner to have a real true voice and let that come out, and this idea of storytelling is key. I love this. So yeah, we're gonna be writing a blog about this podcast too, and I'll spend a lot of time on that one. It's a great lesson. All right. So you also, again, having started out your career in digital here in the
Mhm.
media business, so it wasn't like you were moving from legacy over to you digital first, but you've seen it on both sides, i.e., media and events. And you've seen it across events that are huge, massive trade shows to conferences and like hosted buyer formats.
Mhm.
Um, First of all, out of curiosity, do you see a huge difference between the mindset between media and in-person events when it comes to digital and data?
Truthfully, there doesn't need to be, is the answer to that. But there is. And I think it comes back to the very first point on the pillars around people and culture and just making sure, right? Rightly so, from a commercial standpoint, selling a booth is opportunistic, right? It's the holy grail. It's where you want to get to, and it's hard sometimes to shift outside of that to think about how could we create these experiences that last over and above the 3-day event and could in turn become a much larger piece of the wallet share for those customers, right? So there's a shift in perspective which takes time, and I've seen it across every event organization that I've worked for. It's really hard to do, and I'm sure you've heard that from other people as well. It's not easy. But in truth, the data we collect at an in-person event can be very rich if we're using the right tools and technology to do that. But also, and I know you've heard this from other leaders in the event industry, you can't be so in their face it's invasive, right? So if you're wanting them to wear the RFID thing here and they've got to tap everyone they're just not going to do that, right? And so how do you make it approachable, and also know when to kind of switch off and say, okay, you want to have a conversation with somebody, we're not always going to know, and be okay with that. And so your connections strategy, which is very important to Clarion, it could be if we accomplish like 60-70% of what we're trying to do at an in-person event, that's okay, because the rest of it we can do through media and digital, right, when they're not at the event. So there's certain attributes or data points that I'm trying to understand and I just can't get it from the in-person event, I still build that profile of the person, and I can use other tools and services to collect those data points. So I think it's mapping out what's most critical at the touch point or in the product that they see themselves in. So when they're in person, it's the balance of, time, we talked about that, personal time, personal space, boundaries, as well as leading the charge to create connections, to drive sales, to bring buyers and sellers together, and to create community, right? I think that's a really important part of in person. And then if there are things that you want to accomplish that support media, which are generally further data points that you're trying to collect, right? You do that through value-based products that you deliver through digital environments, whether those are subscription, whether those are membership products, whether those are, niche, right? So they're specific to a segment or a persona that you're trying to reach and learn more about. You have to operationalize in that manner.
Yeah, I think that so my experience is it comes from different directions.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're a media first business that's launched events, right?
Yeah.
you get more of this idea of an integrated solution set, right? How they're connected.
Mhm.
We used to call it vision to decision, or start the conversation early and stay there. Um, Really underscoring that if you have a very engaged audience, that, I mean, the old days we said it was 7 to 10 touch points before conversion. Now it's like 18 to 20.
Oh.
On the flip side, if you're event first, then trying to get into digital and media, it's a much more difficult
Mhm.
transition, because you're right. The the idea of the surround sound type of advertising and digital, it's kind of counterintuitive to, like, I need, you're there for those 3 days, and I want your investment to be
Yeah.
about those 3 days.
And I have a
Um,
really good example on that from the AI tool that we use to, build out the top of funnel for prospecting, that addresses what you said there too, where when we ran that campaign, so for this particular event, they have a lot of crossover between sponsors, attendees, peer to peer and such. And so a person can be an attendee and then they shift to being a sponsor the next year, and then they might come back to being an attendee and could become an exhibitor in the future. So there's a lot of that shift happening, or they play multiple roles even at one event at one point in time. But what we found, but what's difficult, right, is, if your customer is Amazon, to use that as an example, and they're buying a very large booth, they're doing sponsorship, the person that you need to reach for the media side is probably not the same person. In fact, it's not the same person. So that's another difficulty that we have to
yeah.
overcome. But what we found with that prospecting tool is that we were starting to get, if you start to build the people map, and then the company is at the center. So in this example, Amazon's at the center. We were touching not like 3 or 4 people, we were touching like 10 to 15 people in that organization that had an interest in what we were selling to them, right? And so that became a much wider prospect funnel for one company. And that was what was really powerful about this tool, because it meant that we had new connections in an organization that is, you could say, yeah, we can get those connections, but you can't. It's really difficult to do that. And we were able to reach out to them and actually address media opportunities or other ways to engage with them. So that's been a really new way for Clarion anyway, to find a broader prospecting list across a single company.
And this actually goes to not just the sales side, but also attendance.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like the whole account mapping.
Yep.
It's again another mistake I see people
Yep.
make, and that is, no, we're at the decision maker. Well, no, you're really only at the decision maker for that piece. Like, there are multiple decision makers for all these other pieces, and you need to connect that ecosystem together and nurture that account across all of those roles. It's the same thing for attendance. Like,
Exactly.
all different roles could benefit, and this is even becoming more important as organizations, I'm not going to say flatten, because that's,
Mm-hmm.
old language. It's alignment, right? Decisions are becoming more complex, more people are involved in them, um, and especially in certain industries. So your event may actually appeal to 5 or 6 different title levels that actually, through the combined participation, those cross-functional participation, actually delivers exponential ROI, because they've just accelerated their knowledge
Right.
sharing. So that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, let's move on to value-based leadership, because I've actually wanted to talk to you about this. I really love the term. And I also liked what you brought up before about, and then the underlying understanding I have of it, and then the mentoring construct, which is, it's two-way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you give some specific examples of how you're deploying this? Well, one, tell the audience what you mean by value-based leadership, and then we can maybe dive into some specific use cases that you're actively involved in right now.
Sure. So for me, value-based leadership, and I learned about value-based leadership from Professor Kramer, his name is, and he is part of Kellogg's, Northwestern. And of everything I learned in that program, this was the piece that just stuck with me, resonated with me. It inspires me to be a better person, a better leader. And, I'm not perfect, but it's certainly what I think about each and every day. So value-based leadership focuses on humility, so staying humble, acknowledging that you don't know everything, being prepared to listen, active listening, so really listening to what people are saying, not just acknowledging what people are saying, but truly listening. And then making time for people that you work with. And it goes back to the concentric circles. So your innermost circles, but then those that are on the peripheral of your concentric circles, are you making enough time for them? And in his Professor Kramer's example, he often talks about the janitor in the office, right? And how, he had a conversation that led to finding out, something personal about the janitor that he was able to help with, right? And it really transformed that person's life, but it was a tiny thing that he had to do to really make that difference. But, it's just powerful sometimes, the power of listening, right? And actually paying attention to what people are saying. And then with that, and this speaks back to, what's important in our leadership group is accountability. So thinking about that pillar that we talked about right at the beginning around people and culture, you want to create a culture where anyone, right, doesn't matter if it's first jobber, they've been there for 30 years, whoever it is, they want ownership, they have your trust, and therefore they take on the accountability as a result, right? It's a two-way street, as with everything. So with trust and acceptance and that sense of ownership and value comes accountability, right? Everybody's there to work, so there is two sides to that coin. But I think when you can create that environment where people really care about each other, you have retention. So, I think that Clarion this year retention rate is over 90%, right? So every leader on the executive team, in my opinion, fosters a value-based leadership in the way that they work and operate, right? And it's speaking to that, right? So retention means we can invest in our employees because we're not constantly on the rabbit wheel of trying to recruit new people. We've got people that we can invest in. We've got programs we can invest in. People are moving up in the organization. We're finding succession plans. We're building for the future. We've got our future leaders that are growing and being nurtured and mentored right into these roles. And so it's a prophecy that's self-fulfilling because you're able to do keep the people that you want in the organization through the way that you operate and act. And it's just about the way you show up and you present yourself and how authentically you move between the people that you work with.
No, that's really wonderful. Yeah, and I really, I've taken some, what I call executive education courses at
Yeah.
MIT. There's the Sizer group,
Mm-hmm.
and if you do it correctly, you really have to invest the time in it. But I got some really incredible learnings from it that really have reshaped thinking for me on certain levels. So I have to
I
look at
will
the
say it's a vulnerable place to be as a leader, though, right? Because it's not your typical boardroom environment. Let's just say that, right? It's not probably how other generations of boardroom members might operate, but I think the tides are shifting, and it's I've heard this said before that if a woman cries in a meeting, and it's not really about a woman, but because a guy can cry too. If someone cries in a meeting, it's not a sense of weakness. It's showing that they care and they're passionate about something, right? And it's actually changing the way that we assume and think.
I was just, I was going to bring up the vulnerable part, and again, I'm a Gen Xer, so
Mm-hmm.
as a female, when I entered the workforce, it was either you, and one of my first bosses was a very strong female leader,
Yeah.
like really strong, and I learned a lot from her, but she was fierce.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I remember like, okay, I need to be that. But there was no show of weakness ever. And you were not compassionate. You were like, you get the
Yeah.
job done.
Good.
And I think it's a very, very difficult balance for a female leader in particular, at least in my experience,
Mm-hmm.
of like, how do you be that person that can drive performance, but also maintain that caring part that I think we have, as
It's innate.
right, it's innate. Um, with also trying to manage the frustration when you feel, at least I felt like when you try to do that, but then you're told, well, it's a really difficult balance for a woman, I believe. And then so to be vulnerable like that is I think it is tough. And I've just started really saying I just have to admit when I don't know something and I just can't do it or
Yeah.
I'm overwhelmed, and it was a hard thing for me to start doing, but now I'm like, right now I'm like, I need your help. You're smarter than me.
Yeah,
That's why you're here. What do I need to do
exactly.
to let you know that I need you?
Yeah, agreed. And I think, one example on just that in place at work. So one of our key partners, they're helping us with a redesign on our media platform. And, that the team came to me and they said, well, and I really like this partner, I was part of the group that helped decide that we would transition to working with them. And they're running behind on this project, right? And that it is what it is, right? That happens. And so, I said to my team, look, I get it, right? These things happen. We talked through all the issues, and I said, here's what we can offer. We will offer to pay them to work the weekends because I'd rather the launch be on a Saturday and not on a weekday, but I'm prepared to pay because I get it. People have lives. It's an exceptional request. And, the other piece is we'll look at our board across all of the, tickets that we have and, projects that we've got in play, and we'll reprioritize and we'll say anything that's not revenue specific or, needed for an event or specific campaign can go further down so that we can prioritize what needs to be done to get this piece live that we're trying to work on right now. And so for me, then the team was like, oh, okay, because it seemed really fair, right? That was a pretty balanced perspective. It's not like, oh, these guys stink. We need to, do something about that. But it also then created accountability for the vendor, because now it's like, okay, you've just given me all of these get out of jail free cards. So now the ball's in my court to actually fix the issue, right, and deliver on time. And that's what ended up happening. So I think the team learned a lot from that, because we didn't have to yell at them or threaten to take toys away or, just get, and of course I get frustrated. Like when I turn the camera off, it's like, but,
Right.
but what I'm trying to teach my team is if you've chosen to work with this partner, give them the pieces that help them be successful or offer them, and then let them decide how they're going to deliver, right? Because now you've done everything you can as the client, and I feel that you've been fair.
Yep. No, I'm in a position about that right now, by the way. So this was really good insight. All right. So we're coming up to the end of the podcast, and I have a couple of questions, but I think I'm going to focus in on this last one, which is, and you've touched on a lot about this in things you're already doing at Clarion, but from a more future perspective, because this industry it is being disrupted, as it always is, but I think this disruption is going to be particularly profound. What do you see as the next frontier for media and event businesses, especially on the B2B side, and with data and digital at the center of that?
Yeah, so I think that, we're a data organization, right? We're not the first to say that. And I think we have to live and breathe that piece, which I think we're a work in progress, if we're being honest, right? We're figuring out what it means to be a data organization. We're bringing the right skill sets in. We're organizing our team in a way. From an inside out, we as an organization, and this has been a really key part of my role, we're not just accepting what vendors and partners tell us, right? That has been the way of the world, I would say, up until most recent times, where a vendor will say, well, this is how we're going to operate. This is the data that you'll get. This is the format you'll get it in. Here's the statement of work, right? And you sign it and off you go. Now we say, okay, we've got tiers of vendors. We've got our value vendors who are top tier. And here's the pro forma of how we'd like to work with you from a data architecture, how we would like to receive our data, the frequency, where it comes into our organization, the format, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can work with us and adhere to that, you become a value-based partner, and we're giving you stuff back in return. So one of our partners who we receive raw data from in the format that we need it, we also have our tools on their platforms for A/B testing, for tracking user behavior and all those elements, and we share all of that data back with them. So they're now able to see, for a Clarion event, here's where the user is having issues, here's where they're dropping off, here's where they're spending like way too much pause time not actioning things. So there's a reciprocal benefit there that allows the vendor to improve their product, right? And I'm open to that, because that's the Amazon way of the world, right? What comes around goes around, in terms of the model. So that's the internal transformation, right? Is around data integrity, data structure, vendor priority based on the value that they see from working with us, to say, yeah, we want to be able to provide you that data in that format, and here are the rules of engagement. Then I think for the industry as a whole, for the customer, interestingly, some pieces, so building for the future, right? So we're trying to, not to give all of our secrets away, but we're really trying to think about data, but also Gen Z, Gen A. They're not the ones going to events today. We said that right at the beginning, right? The company's not going to give them, 5K with hotel, travel, the cost of a badge to attend the second day on their job. They're just not, unless it was already in their contract. But what we can do is utilize our content and AI to create different ways for them to learn about the industry, right? So that could be like packaging up content in different ways, slicing and dicing it, creating subscription, like recurring revenue is really important to us. And so we're spending a lot of time around memberships. And building their knowledge and expertise of the industry, of who the shakers and thinkers are, who are the thought leaders, what are the acronyms and the words of the industry as well. You've got to learn all of that to become a subject matter expert, and shaping them so that when they do get that 5K, which could be 8K by the time they're able to go, they can attend a conference and be confident, right, when they're there. And we want those attendees of the future to be confident when they come. I don't know if you remember, but I remember going to conferences when I was younger, and it's really intimidating as well, I think. So how do we build that up, right? So that's an important part of that thinking and feeling as well. And then the last thing I'll say, I mean, there's a lot, right? And these experiences, even on site, and I'm not the event expert, but they're becoming much more niche and much more specific. And if you think of energy, right, just as one example, we've just acquired Infocast. So now we've got this amazing energy portfolio, and we're spending a lot of time thinking about, what does the community for energy look like? What are the membership opportunities? If I was to create a membership across all of the experiences that a person could touch in their bio card, right, of what they do and act and how they feel, what could that look like? So we're definitely thinking about membership. We're thinking about first party data, as everyone is. We want to create identities of people so that when I look at Heather as a whole, I can tell you what she likes, what she doesn't, what annoyed her at the event, who she engages with, why she doesn't engage with certain types of session speakers or people at events. On the media side, what resonates with her, how we're working with speakers to create that longevity, all of those pieces, right? I can say about you, but then it's about, what do I do about that to create that, whether that's custom experience, that niche experience, what those data points mean, to sponsors. And rather than thinking about, we've got to try to generate 3,000 leads, maybe I only generate 50 leads, but those leads are extremely rich.
Mm-hmm. No, all right. So you touched on quite a few things, and I believe the community one is absolutely critical, by the way, because especially, how important it is to gain very deep relationships with your audience, and providing additional daily value versus simply, coming and reading a blog or an article. And then you brought something else up that I thought was, it's this shared data, like a shared data partnership to allow you to give your partners, your customers, much deeper insights into not just marketing campaigns, let's say, but actually product engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really that's different, you know. So, well, all right. With that, we're now going over. So I just have two little fast, I call them rapid fire questions. And so my first one is, what is the most unusual place you've traveled to?
The most unusual place I've traveled to, unusual is an interesting word, but I would say it is probably New Zealand, South Island.
I've heard that a few times. I
Have
hear
you?
it's a fascinating place. Yeah, actually, it's on my bucket list now.
Okay.
What is the best book you've read?
So this goes back to my childhood, and I've been saving this. I was hoping you would ask because I was thinking about that. It's actually a really difficult question, but it's one I've read with all my kids as well. It's The Magic Faraway Tree. So Enid Blyton, British author, classic English writer. She, she's the one that lives with me as I grow and age. And there's lots of stories and lessons in those books around friendship and caring and listening and being attentive and being kind that you learn from those books, and they're just lovely.
I'm going to look those up. I have two nephews, but I mean, for myself, I love those books, those kind
Yeah,
of books.
we
Well,
need to
listen,
mistake
thank
sometimes.
you, Narissa. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen. Um, if for the audience, you can look Narissa up on LinkedIn. It's Narissa with one S, not two. And listen, happiest of holidays, and thank you.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
I'm excited to announce a new solution from H2K Labs, Revved Up. Revved Up is an invitation-only gathering and a brain trust for CEOs and their revenue-critical C-suite teams leading multi-sided businesses such as media, events, data and insights, marketplaces, and professional networks. I launched Revved Up for a few reasons. The first one is I'm extremely passionate about empowering our industry to write the rules versus ceding business value to tech platforms. And with AI no longer an on-the-horizon situation, it's here to stay. And with threats abounding, it's time for us to turn those threats into opportunities and to establish the rules of the game versus being told what to do. The second reason is there's clearly a gap in the market for events as an industry, and I want to fill that gap. We need new faces in the room, we need future-forward serious discussions, and we need cross-industry and cross-functional convergence. And most importantly, we need to take this discussion from 50,000 feet down to 10 and 5,000 feet. It's time for the conversation about data and its role in driving significant and sustainable enterprise value to take center stage. This discussion should leave you neither confused nor bored, but instead equip you and your teams with actionable strategies and playbooks to implement back at the office. It's about making existing revenue streams better, improving profitability, launching new revenue streams, and creating defensible competitive advantage. It's about CEOs helping CEOs learn how to navigate this increasingly complex race course. According to Gartner, 86% of CEOs believe AI will maintain or grow company revenues and enterprise value over the next 3 years, yet they do not know where to strategically focus their efforts. I hear this all the time when we talk to clients. That's where we come in. At Revved Up, we'll dive into how to fuel enterprise value, as well as to create sustainable competitive barriers to entry. Revved Up for CEOs and C-suite leaders takes place February 25th through the 27th in Sarasota, Florida. Please visit h2klabs.com/revvedup to learn more, and that's 2 V's.